Welcome to another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences, emergency podcast edition with our friend Jefferson Morley. Jeff has been on the show, I believe, 4 times now. And
Uh-huh.
Mr. Morley is a JFK researcher, journalist, author. I always have his books handy. Scorpion's Dance, which is a fantastic book. And I'm a huge fan. Jeff, thanks for coming back on the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Bill. It's like coming home, you
Hey,
know?
listen, I love having you on. I know how dedicated you are to this. So let's kind of like recap. Everything's moving quickly, yet at the same time, it's not moving very quickly. Let's give our audience a little kind of recap of things. So on January 23rd, Trump signs an executive order for full and complete release, not only of JFK files, but RFK and MLK assassination records. Then, in just a head scratcher, a couple weeks ago, the FBI announces 14,000 pages, about 2,400 newly discovered records about the JFK case. I mean, huge head scratcher there. And now we have big changes in leadership at both the CIA and the FBI. Jeff, I mean, talk about a whirlwind month for you.
Yeah.
What is your reaction to all this, particularly the FBI's claim that 14,000 pages of new material just happened to pop up 61 years later?
Yeah. So actually, I actually give the FBI credit, and I want to talk about that. But let's go back to the beginning. Okay.
Okay.
So beginning with Trump's order. Okay. Trump's order was a very positive thing, a full and complete disclosure of JFK records. Why is Trump doing this? One thing that Trump was embarrassed about was that he didn't do this in 2017. And he took a lot of heat. I mean, he took a lot of heat from people like JFK researchers. That
Sure.
doesn't matter to him. But he also took a lot of heat from close allies like Tucker Carlson, Andrew Napolitano, who said, "Why didn't you release this?" And if you listen to their interviews, like Trump's very defensive. He doesn't have anything to say. He doesn't want to talk about it. He's very, and it's clear from some remarks that he was very bitter at Mike Pompeo for recommending this to him, because he really took a beating with his own base.
Yeah.
So so the order was welcome. But when I appeared on Tucker Carlson like the next day, I said, be aware there are pitfalls to come. Okay. The CIA is not going to take this sitting down. Just because the president wrote something on a piece of paper, the CIA is going to go do something. That's not the way the CIA works, not on JFK. Okay.
Yeah.
So we can be sure that there's a CIA pushback. And now a month later, already we see the deadline starting to slip. Now, some of that's natural, right? Things take time to get done. I don't want to overstate that. But when the government is 8 years past the legal deadline,
Yeah.
nobody's in a mood to grant extensions. It's like, get on with it already. And the fact is, Bill, these records, most of them, not all of them, but most of them are located in the National Archives 2 facility, state-of-the-art facility in College Park, Maryland. Any administration any administration official with a security clearance could go and look at them tomorrow morning. It's possible that some might be held offsite and they'd have to wait 2 days. But these documents can be retrieved right away. And so, where are they? Well, now let's talk about the FBI records. The FBI's actions actually are positive, okay? The FBI went out, they found some JFK records. They said, we found JFK records. They checked. They admitted they had not made them available for public review before, which is not in violation of the JFK Records Act. But at least they did the right thing, and they have given those records to the National Archives. I just got a note from an FBI spokesman. They have turned those records over to the National Archives for release, and they said they don't know when. I asked the National Archives when they'll be released. They haven't responded yet. Okay, but at least the FBI is complying with the law. And the circumstances in which those records came to light is important to note, okay? Because this is where technological change matters. When the JFK Review Board existed in the 1990s, this was the independent civilian review board set up to administer the JFK Records Act, which said all government agencies have to release all of their JFK files. So the law created an independent board. This was a very good move. And the board reviewed and processed and really created this great body of records where we can really now have a much more complete understanding of President Kennedy's assassination. So, that was all to the good. But at that time in the 1990s, no records were digitized. And, how could you retrieve them? What the FBI said in their statement was that they had digitized records since 2020. And when they went back to search their records in response to the president's orders, they discovered these records. What that tells me is that the digitization enables much better and more thorough searching of the documents.
Makes
right?
sense. Makes sense.
Right? You put in the metadata. If you put in Oswald. Is there an Oswald hit in that file? Before you could only go on kind of the crudest indicators, a date, right? We have a file, or a location, Dallas FBI office, or a personality, Lee Harvey Oswald, or whatever, right? That's pretty crude searching. With digitization, you can do very accurate searching. So the FBI went back, and because the records were digitized, they discovered more records. So first of all, responsible bureaucratic behavior by the FBI, overdue, but responsible. So we can thank them for that. Now, the CIA needs to do the same thing. You need to go back and check their records. We're not accusing anybody of anything, but records get missed. And when records are digitized, they're more retrievable. So the CIA needs to do the same thing that the FBI did, get these records out there. Now, we had another development in all of this, Bill, which is Chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, appointed a bunch of junior Republicans to a task force on federal secrets. And the federal secrets were the JFK, RFK, and MLK assassinations, as well as the origins of COVID, the clients of Jeffrey Epstein, and UFOs and unidentified aerial phenomena. Okay,
That's a hell of a list, Jeff.
Yeah, no, way beyond the capability of a committee. And it has it's not a good idea. Okay, it has the makings of a farcical, superficial, sensationalized, media-tailored approach, which is completely inappropriate for JFK files. And I was very heartened to see today, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who was appointed by Comer to head this task force, and who announced today on Twitter that their first hearing would be on March 26th, and that they would visit Dallas and they would interview living witnesses. Okay, she announced this at 8 or 9 o'clock this morning. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, she had 9,000 responses, 95% of which were negative. Okay, there's this expression on the internet, getting ratioed, right? Where the ratio of your negative comments to your positive comments is higher, right? She got ratioed something wicked. And by the end of the day, she's in full retreat, telling her followers, I have no declassification authority, a point she had mentioned before.
Oops.
and telling General Flynn is even piling on her and begging with Flynn not to, say bad things about her. So this idea that we're going to go hold a hearing and we're going to, make some hay out of it, that doesn't even sell with the MAGA base. Okay. That idea. And what people said was what I've been saying, and I'm not a MAGA guy, what I've been saying for 10 years, just release the records. Yeah. Okay. We're not interested in your opinion. We want the records. So the order's a good thing. The FBI compliance is a good thing. CIA needs to go along. Representative Luna, attention on this matter, an independent review of what Trump is doing, that's a good idea. Okay. A social media driven publicity blitz to help Republicans win re-election next time, that's a bad idea. Okay. Combining Jeffrey Epstein with JFK, come on, like
Yeah.
let's have a serious approach. These are serious topics, and I'm not saying the Jeffrey Epstein story isn't important. It is, but it has nothing to do with JFK. Period. The end.
Yeah.
Okay. The type of expertise that's needed to address the Jeffrey Epstein story is very different than the type of expertise that's needed to finish the JFK story. Let's keep those separate. That's why I was so heartened by the overwhelmingly negative reaction to this publicity stunt of we're going to hold some hearings. Nobody's falling for that. We need to see the records. So I think that, because this this political environment is very strongly in favor of full disclosure, we have a chance to do it. But the fact that it's 30 days later and still nothing happened, that indicates that there are institutional pressures against full JFK disclosure. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Now, in Representative Luna's press conference announcing the task force, I remember this.
Yeah.
She came out and made some pretty crazy claims. I mean, I think she came out and was like, well, yeah, from what I've reviewed so far, there's probably a second shooter. I'm going, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah, but you know what? She hadn't reviewed the documents.
Yeah.
She had done some reading in the JFK story, and I give her credit for that. She seems to have tried to do some homework. But there's no evidence. None of these files that we're talking about concern the medical evidence or the forensic evidence around two shooters. The forensic evidence that the president was hit by crossfire is quite strong. And we have the 2023 documentary, What the Doctors Saw, where the doctors who tried to save JFK's life.
Amazing, amazing documentary.
Yeah, and these doctors, there's 6 or 7 of them, said unanimously Kennedy had been hit by gunfire from 2 different directions. So right there, we have reason to doubt the official story. We need to have a serious approach, and hopefully these gimmicks are not going to fly, and the government's going to have to do the right thing.
Wow, amazing stuff. Now, this is a legal podcast. Now, last time I had you on, you'd given us some legal updates because I know your team's been spending some time in court. Is there anything legally going on that you can update us on that may expedite this process, or is it kind of a sit and wait, or are there some things legally you can do to get in front of a judge to push this thing along?
Well, basically, what we in the government, we meaning the Mary Farrell Foundation and the government, with these developments was basically kick the can down the road. And what this means for our lawsuit, for the Mary Farrell Foundation lawsuit, demanding full compliance with the JFK Records Act, that's not clear yet. I mean, if the executive order 14176 is fully implemented, there would be no need for the lawsuit. We concede that. But if it's not fully implemented, the need for the lawsuit is redoubled. So we're kind of waiting to see how this shakes out before we go back into court and take this up with the government. Precisely because it's not clear how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, and yeah, I was. This was not on my outline to ask you questions about, but it came up on my news feed about an hour ago. Clint Hill passed away, and could you tell our audience who Clint Hill was, and did you ever have an opportunity to interview Mr. Hill?
Clint Hill was the Secret Service officer, about the only Secret Service agent on the scene of President Kennedy's assassination who reacted appropriately. When the gunfire rang out, he jumped onto the back of the limousine. Jackie Kennedy was trying to get on the back seat of the limousine, I think probably trying to retrieve a piece of her husband's head. And he got her back in the limousine and covered her up as the motorcade went on to the hospital.
That's a pretty iconic picture of that.
Yeah. And I never interviewed Clint Hill. He was a tortured man because he had failed and had a lot of issues with that. He became a strong defender of the official account of President Kennedy's assassination. And I don't think that he had a particularly strong argument. I think that it was very difficult for a career guy like him to really break with the government and say the whole story wasn't true. So, I understood why he came from what he was saying, even though I don't think that I don't, I didn't agree with it. Um, Clint Hill, there's a terrific movie, Clint Eastwood, In the Line of Fire,
Wonderful
which,
movie. But boy, am I,
yeah,
I'm getting old, Jeff. I'm
yeah,
getting old. That movie came out a while ago.
yeah, no, I mean, it's not the Clint Hill story. It's a fictionalized story, but it is based on the idea of a Service agent who failed to protect President Kennedy. Um, and it's not a movie about the Kennedy assassination. It turns into a whole different kind of CIA plot, but a very entertaining, good movie. And people should know that it was based loosely on the story of Clint Hill.
Was John Malkovich the bad guy in that one?
Yes, yes,
And
yeah,
boy, he played a great bad guy.
yeah,
He
and
was.
boy, was he bad.
Oh, he was such a psycho. That was a great movie. So, lots of stuff to come. How do you think? Well, first of all, how was your tell us about I loved your interview with Tucker Carlson. I am glad I got to you before he did. Now I got you again, so I have those bragging rights over Tucker. How did that interview go? And did did that interview do anything for you, or did it get you more, I guess, more exposure to this issue that otherwise maybe you didn't have before?
Yeah, no, I had talked to Tucker Carlson. He had invited me on his show once before, and I turned him down when he was on Fox back when Biden was doing the order. And I wasn't comfortable because of our political differences. But this time, I thought the interview went very well. Yes, and it enabled me to reach people who are not, who I wouldn't otherwise reach, and had a positive influence on our subscriptions. So, you know, in general, media interest is rising. I did the Today Show, also after that,
Yeah.
and I did Piers Morgan, over in the UK. And so, and I've done some local radio in Minneapolis, local TV in Phoenix. So this story is really in the news and people are asking about it. When Congresswoman Luna posted that announcement today, she got 10,000 responses in 10 hours.
Wow.
So, and this was the hardcore MAGA crowd. These are not people who are
Yeah.
inclined to criticize the administration or the president or Republicans in Congress. And they were uniformly, I mean, 98% negative, saying just release the documents. We don't want any hearings. So that, there's something really going on in public opinion now where people's patience is at an end, right? And so I think that's the most positive development we have right now, absent we still haven't gotten any documents.
Yeah. How do you think? I mean, because everybody's going crazy over the Epstein list, right?
Yeah.
And you have a lot of changes in leadership, a lot of promise. Do you have, I guess, a personal fear that in the batting order that the JFK stuff may not be number one in the batting
Yeah,
order?
no, no, absolutely. I mean, you can tell these politicians, they're salivating about the Epstein list. I was on a podcast today, and they were saying, uh, I said, the JFK files. I thought it was appropriate that the committee and the task force had made JFK the first issue because it's the original historical
Yeah,
issue, been around the longest. Also, it's been the subject of the most investigation. We know
sure.
where these records are. It's the easiest job to do also, and the most important. So I was saying, why not start with that? And this anchor woman said, "Oh, but I think the Epstein files are so important. It just shows how hypocritical these people are." And I said, I agree. I think that people who were on Jeffrey Epstein's plane, like Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, should be held accountable. You know, but that's not a substitute for doing something about JFK. That's a separate important issue, but we need to do JFK first and get it right.
I totally agree with you. And Yeah, I appreciate all your efforts. I know all of your fans and followers appreciate your efforts, and hopefully this works out here sooner than later. Because boy, there's going to be so much to talk about. Now, in our previous interviews, and you've mentioned this before, one of the Joanides file. I think that's the one you're salivating over, right? Is
Yeah.
that I guess, is there any control as far as how these records get released, or is there hey, I want this one first, or you kind of have to sit back and you're at the mercy of the government to how these come out?
Well, I mean, this was why the FBI's action was positive because it
Mhm.
was proactive, right? It was, we're going to go look for records. And if the CIA did the same thing that the FBI did, they would go get the Joanides file and make it available, right? It's a JFK related record. We know that. Judge Tunheim, the head of the Assassination Records Review Board, said absolutely the entire Joanides file should be made public. Okay. It's in the possession of the CIA. It's in the CIA's office that handles Freedom of Information Act requests because these documents were the subject of a Freedom of Information Act request. So, you know, they could be easily located. But, you know, is there somebody in the administration who's going to tell, you know, the CIA to put it in there? I mean, Representative Luna did ask the CIA to identify all of its JFK documents that it had in possession, which was the one thing that she's done that I salute her for. That's a positive move because it's proactive. It's saying, go get that record.
Yeah.
So that hasn't happened yet. Now, and I don't think it's going to happen because a congresswoman tells them to do it. And I don't think it's going to happen because the president tells them to do it. I think it's going to happen because public opinion is going to tell them they don't have any choice. If they make any other choice, that's going to be more unpleasant than releasing the records. And it's just a pleasure pain calculus on the CIA. Now, but I think the political environment is right for that. And I return to that negative reaction to Congresswoman Luna's, you know, announcement of these hearings. People aren't interested in that. They want the records, period.
Yeah. Now you've stated very publicly you expect the CIA to put up many walls and to delay because that's the playbook. Does the new leadership does that have any role in that?
I, you know, I think it does. I mean, we can anticipate that the institutional apparatus of the CIA is going to make arguments to Pam Biondi and Marco Rubio that some of this information has nothing to do with JFK and it can't be released because its sources and methods are living. Okay. We can be sure they're going to make that argument and that that's going on right now. So, you know, uh, that would be par for the course. Now, but I think in this environment, they're going to have to throw the public a few bones.
Yeah.
And, you know, what's useful or what's interesting about when they do this is by releasing some things and holding on to others, they help us identify what is the most sensitive thing that they want to hide the most. And the Joanides file involving the chief of covert action in the Miami branch in 1963. I mean, that's right down the strike zone, right?
Yeah.
This is something they've never wanted to talk about. They lied to the Warren Commission about it. They lied to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, and they lied to the JFK Review Board. So, you know, they're not going to change that stance, but
Hmm.
because there's something here they really, really don't want to talk about. So we can anticipate that they're going to try and hang on to that, but that will tell us, that will confirm for us just how important the Joanides file is.
Now, recently, you have to get me up to date on this. I sent you a text message about this, right? There was a recent audio tape that was released, and you have to tell
Yes.
me who these two people were. But essentially, this really put the spotlight on LBJ.
Yes.
And this was because if you could educate our audience about that, because that did go around. I listened to it. It's kind of hard. The audio's not great. But who are the people on the audio? Because I thought this was a real eye opener.
Yeah. A very interesting tape. So here's how the tape surfaced. This is a tape of a man named Billy Saul Estes, who was a wheeler dealer lobbyist in Washington in the 50s and 60s in the orbit of Lyndon Johnson when he was Senate Majority Leader and then when he was Vice President. Um, and he's talking to a man named Cliff Carter, also a Democrat from Texas, worked in the Democratic National Committee. And in the tape, which was produced by a grandson of Billy Saul Estes, who had inherited it from a relative, Estes is heard saying to Carter, well, Johnson hired that man, Mac Wallace, to shoot the president, and, that was too bad, And so he states it, plain as day that Johnson had hired somebody to kill the president. Now, that name, Mac Wallace,
Yeah.
that's familiar to the JFK research community. And the best book on the subject by Joan Mellon, a professor at Temple University, to me had really shown that the evidence that was produced that Mac Wallace was involved in Kennedy's assassination was not strong at all. Okay. So this tape went against what my sense of what the evidence was. So that doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means, what's going on here. So I contacted the guy who controls the tape, who's a grandson of Billy Saul Estes, and got him to tell me how he came across the tape. And I found his story, very convincing. And I said, I wanted to authenticate the tape and kind of understand better where it came from. The tape apparently was made in 1971 when Johnson was still alive. Okay, so why are these men talking about the Kennedy assassination and President Johnson in 1971? And you wonder about a tape like that. Like, were they making a tape to make a tape so that a tape could be used for something as opposed to just a
Yeah.
candid conversation? You have to be careful when you get evidence like this. So, I mean, I'm not saying the guy's wrong. I'm just saying I want to understand that better. So he was agreeable, and I'm still hoping to do that. So, it's another example of, there is evidence out there related to the Kennedy assassination. How important is it? That remains to be seen. But, there are new things to be discovered. That's what I took away from that story.
Yeah, pretty incredible stuff. One more
Yeah.
JFK question, then I have an off the wall question for you for us to finish up with. Explain to our audience who James Files is. I have seen several videotapes with James. I think a couple from jail.
Yeah.
James Files, essentially, I want you to correct me here. He claims he was one of the shooters and gives this extraordinary detail about where he was placed, right? I mean, all this stuff. And now since you've been on, now his videos are resurfacing and there's like, so it's in the algorithm, it's coming up. But is this guy full of it?
Well, the problem with James Files' story was, you know, was there anything to put him in Dallas on that day? A hotel receipt,
Yeah.
uh, testimony from somebody else. I mean, I checked out James Files' story. It's interesting. To me, the strongest thing in favor of it was that an FBI agent who worked on his case came to believe him. Okay, so
Really?
a enforcement source said this guy's credible. Okay, now I'm not saying an FBI agent's always right, but that's worth something to me in terms of evidence. But other than that, there was no corroborating evidence. And, yes, the story is incredibly detailed, but is that like the product of an imagination? Is that the product of somebody who's read and been in prison and had plenty of time to read the JFK literature, or some combination thereof? So it's like, it's one of those things, like, it might be true. I think that there are more plausible candidates for Dealey Plaza gunmen than James Files. I'll put it that way. But because it has recurred, I think I'll go back and take another look at it.
His descriptions are extraordinarily detailed. That's the kind of shocking thing there. His descriptions are very, very detailed, and who he talked to and like position of other shooters is like, and then he repeats it pretty consistently. So it's an interesting thing. I think when it first came out, a lot of people were like, "This guy's full of shit," and then he's resurfaced and he's been interviewed several times. So I encourage our audience or any
And
other, yeah,
I'm going to take this as a reminder to revisit his story and and satisfy myself as to whether there's anything to it or not.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Okay, final topic. I mean, in your research and publications, you know the CIA just as well as anybody else. Um, Outside of the JFK assassination, the CSI is getting a lot of press lately in the last 30 days. Mike Benz, I'm sure you've heard of Mike Benz, has been very, very popular in the last 30 days, who has called out this USAID issue, right? And Mike Benz's quote was, "If it's too dirty for the CIA, you go through USAID." And he essentially said that millions and no, not millions, billions of tax dollars have gone to USAID, and about how that turned into funding for all kinds of crazy things, including CIA operations that would have never been approved the traditional way. What have you heard about this, and have you made any
Well,
conclusions? Because it's very popular right now, particularly on X and other social media platforms.
well, USAID was an instrument of US soft power
From
during
JFK executive
yeah,
order, right? Yeah.
yeah, during the Cold War, and as a lot of those types of operations, soft power operations, originated in the CIA in what was called the International Operations Division. So there was the Directorate of Plans, which carried out covert operations, and then international operations carried out not covert operations in that sense, but influence operations. And as those operations were exposed in the 60s and 70s, the CIA gradually turned to AID as cover, something they had used all along. But it became cover. And so, this is the fate of AID. This is one of the costs of covert action, right? Which is if you use a government agency as a front for secret activities, then you forfeit the trust of the public. And
Yeah.
you know what AID has learned is they didn't have any reservoir of trust in the American people, and for good reason, because the use of AID for CIA operations is a consistent record, over the last 50 years. So, I think that AID did some good work, but AID is basically an imperial project, right? It was a way of sustaining American interventions abroad. And so while it was, helping people with hunger and supporting media, it was also always aligned with US foreign policy goals, which were not in favor of free media if we didn't
Yeah.
like the free media in that country.
Yeah.
We crushed the free media. And so, the idea that AID was standing up for independent media, that's true. And lots of journalists depended on it, lots of journalists doing good work. But again, the price of covert action, you know, nobody trusts the US government as a result. And the idea that we're just selflessly doing good, you know,
Yeah.
that argument, it just doesn't hold any
No.
more water. Not after all these failed wars. It's like there's no more trust that when people come and say it's national security, just trust us, go along with us. That doesn't sell anymore. That's why Trump won. You know, and I'm not a Trump fan, but I'm saying that's why he won,
Yeah.
because he won that argument. You know, and so now government policy will change as a result. That's what happens in a democracy.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Obviously, going to have you back again as things develop. Let's hope, even if it's slow progress, let's just keep pushing forward, and hopefully things things play out,
I think,
and then you get your hands on
yeah,
that, yeah, on these other files, and then we'll see where this goes. But I think we're on the brink here of something big. I really, really hope, and I know that you've put a lifetime of work into this, so I know you're excited. But I think it's another thing where I think you're excited, but you're not too excited because you know how this goes.
Yeah, but we are in a new era, and I think it's not what government officials or courts say. Public opinion can drive successful results in this more than what any public official can do. So if public opinion is mobilized for full disclosure, it may be impossible for anybody in a Washington institution to resist. They may have to do it, no matter how little they want to do it. That's my hope.
It's going to be interesting. Jeff, stick around so we could chat afterwards. To our audience, thank you for participating in this emergency podcast of the Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences. Dr. Bill Kanasky, we will see you next time.